Come on in, pull up a chair. There's a story between the verses. Real talk, real faith, life healing, growth and grace. You're listening to Between the Verses with Kelli LaVerne.
Welcome to Between the Verses, real talk, real faith with Kelli LaVerne. This is Eavesdrop, where we listen a little closer to the women between the verses. Now, girlfriends and guys, in case they're listening in too, today we're going to talk about old girl. Now, I call her that because everyone, well, just about everyone, but probably really everyone knows her story. Well, parts of it at least. And parts of it will definitely sound familiar. But I think you'll learn some stuff along the way. So let's get into it. Because today we need to talk about Ruth. And this one feels different. Because like I said, people usually tell Ruth's story like a love story. Like it's about Boaz, like it's about romance, like it's about finally getting her happy ending. But friend, I don't think that's actually the story. Because Ruth's story, if we think about it, starts long before Boaz ever shows up, right? It starts with loss, and I'm talking real loss. The kind of loss that changes the room, that changes the atmosphere. It changes everything. The kind of loss that changes how you even see the future. Now, we know Eve was about influence. Sarah was about waiting. Leah was about being overlooked. Rachel was about having what others wanted and still feeling empty. But Ruth is about losing everything. And catch this, and still choosing faith. So let me tell you about Ruth. Now, her story can be found in the book of Ruth. She has her own book named after her. Primarily chapters 1 to 4 with some key scriptures. Ruth chapter 1, 1 to 18. Ruth chapter 1, verses 19 to 22. Then Ruth chapter 2, 3, and 4. So that's where she can be found in the Bible. And I encourage you, after listening to this, go back and read it and see if you can pick up on this. I already know, you read it 100 times, you've heard it, you can probably recite it. You know, Ruth was out there threshing and Boaz walked up and said, "Hey, fine thing, what you doing? Come over here with me." No, that's not how the story went. But, our mind, we kind of put pieces together like that, like it was this romantic love story. But anyway, this is where you can find her story in the Bible. Now, one thing about Ruth, she wasn't from Israel. She was a Moabite. She was an outsider, y'all. Different culture, different people, different history. And somehow she ends up marrying into Naomi's family. Now, that's key right there. Because if we know anything about Bible days, usually they did not marry outside of their culture. They didn't marry different people with different history from different background. It was rare, okay? It did happen, but, it was rare. So she marries into Naomi's family, right? And for a while, life looks normal. It looks predictable. It looks stable. But then everything starts unraveling. And I mean everything, okay? Starts to unravel. Naomi's husband dies. Yeah, I had to take a deep breath on that one. That one hurt. Then Ruth's husband dies. So Ruth was married, okay? Her husband died. Then Naomi's other son dies, and suddenly everything changes. And I just want us to sit here for a minute, because sometimes, we read the stories in the Bible too fast. Sometimes we're just reading to be reading to get through it, or we're reading because we're looking for something, or we're just not, taking it all in as we're reading it. But let's sit here for a minute. I mean, think about it. 3 funerals, 3, not 1, 3, 3. I had several years back, there was a period in my life where it seems like we lost half of the family, like in a 6-month period. It was devastating. We had an uncle, and my uncle, he was the patriarch of the family. He was the pillar. We lost him, and then shortly after his wife, and then we lost 2 cousins, and their parents were a different uncle and aunt. There's a couple other people we lost around that same time. Most recently, a lot listening may already know, but I lost my mom. And what are we in 2026? 5 years ago, I lost my dad. Going back again several years ago, wow, I think this had to be 2008. 2008, I lost my younger brother and my younger sister. One was in, I believe my brother passed in March and my sister passed in May. And then by June, I'm in the hospital with a serious illness. Thank God he spared me. But I just shared all that to say, I can kind of relate to this feeling. And anybody, if you lost a loved one, I mean, even one loved one, that's tragic enough to turn your world upside down. So here we see 3, and they were 3 men. 2 were husbands, and then another son. I'm sorry, all 3. Wait, sorry. Naomi's husband, Ruth's husband, and I think the other son was married to, was it Oprah? Oprah? All right, let's not get off track. But 3. So, yeah, Oprah. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her name right, but we have 3 women left. No husbands, no protection, no obvious future, just grief. Now, let me just add something else here, because, today, we have a lot of resources and things to tap into when we lose someone. And, there's different options that are available. Today we have a lot of women who are working, who have the means to, carry themselves through, to take some time to get stable, get on their feet, or whatnot. Back in this time, the women didn't necessarily have that. There was without a husband, you didn't have protection. There was like no future for you. You were, especially, you were widowed. The Bible says that, the church should take care of the widows and the orphans, because that's how, widows were left with very little. And I know, we have some today that go through that, but I'm just trying to paint the picture. We kind of glossed over that, and we go right into this kind of like romance story, like Boaz to the rescue. But think about what they were dealing with before Boaz even shows up. And here, again, we rush ahead because we know what's coming. We know Boaz is coming. We know redemption is coming. We know how the story works. But get this, At the time, Ruth didn't. She was living it like we live our lives, one day at a time. Now, yeah, we know, for those of us that Bible believers, we know in the end, we win and what the Bible promises us, but we don't know. We don't know what tomorrow holds. We don't know what the next second holds. Only God knows. So Ruth didn't know that, oh yeah, as soon as I get over this hump, there's going to be this handsome man riding in to save the day. She didn't know that. She's experiencing this grief. She's living this life. And as far as she knows, her future is gone. Okay, there's no chapter 4 for her yet. There's no husband, no child, no promise, no guarantee, no clue how any of this ends. And that's what makes her story powerful. She doesn't make her decision knowing it'll work out. She makes it with not knowing, without knowing. She didn't know none of this would happen. And we need to grasp that, get a hold of that to kind of really see what's happening here. So now, let's move on, okay? So Naomi decides to return home. She's going back to Bethlehem because it was familiar. And, during a time of loss, even today, family will gather, or people might relocate, or they'll downsize, or they go back to somewhere, or try to go somewhere either familiar or to try to make a fresh start. But whatever the reason, Naomi decides to just leave, pick up everything and go back to Bethlehem and back to familiar ground. And she tells Ruth and Orpah something that makes complete sense. This is something that, you would pretty much logically say, go home, start over, find new husbands, build new lives. Now, see, Naomi realized that, they were young. They still had life to live. They could start over. And honestly, nobody would have blamed them, because staying with Naomi wasn't practical. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't promising. There was no visible benefit. And one of them leaves. Orpah goes back. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the decision she made. She made a reasonable choice, an understandable choice, a safe choice. But Ruth stays. And this is where the story gets deep. We're going to go a little deep today, just a little bit, teeny tiny bit. Because Ruth says, catch this, wherever you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people. Your God, my God. Okay? That's powerful right there. That is powerful. Those 3 little sentences, that is very, very powerful. We just read right over it. But she is committing her whole life, everything that she knew from the past, everything that could possibly happen in the future, to Naomi. And get this, not only to Naomi, but to her God. And people quote that at weddings, but this wasn't a wedding speech. This was a surrender speech. Ruth is saying, I don't know what's ahead. I don't know what this costs. I don't know how this ends, but I'm going anyway. And let me tell you, that's faith. That is 100% faith. Not faith after the outcome, faith before the outcome. And those two are very different things. So let's make this real. Let's bring it in a little closer. Just lean in. Because this isn't just Ruth. This is taking a job you don't fully understand, moving somewhere unfamiliar. I'm a witness, did that oh wow, coming up on 4 years now. Starting over after a loss, choosing obedience when the outcome isn't guaranteed. I don't know how this is going to work, but I know I can't go backwards. And honestly, girlfriends, some of the biggest decisions in life feel exactly like that. Might not know what's next, where you're going, what the end result will be, but one thing you know for sure, you can't go backwards. Been there. So they arrive in Bethlehem, and Naomi, she's carrying pain. Now, remember, she's coming back to a familiar place where she's lost. Great loss. Think about her sons, her husband, her hopes of even having grandchildren are just gone. And she's going back to, a familiar place now, ladies. Y'all know how that can be. You go back, and I don't know if the news traveled before she got there. I don't know if people, knew what was going on. But she goes back, and I could just imagine, oh, where's your son? Where's your husband? Oh, where's your other daughter-in-law? Oh, why you look so sad? Why you look so people people can be something else. And I like to give them the benefit of the doubt and think they don't mean any harm. But you just ever see them rush in with the questions, blip 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 blip. Don't even take a minute to even ask, how are you? But just blah, blah, blah about all the questions about people that they don't see around or with you. But she was going back there carrying pain. And the women recognize her. So Naomi, she sets it straight because she says, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. And that means bitter. And that hurts. Now listen, it hurts because she's hurting, and she's not even being dramatic. She's being honest. She's being honest. Like, why do we just have such a hard time with people just being honest at that moment, how they feel? We want to pretty it all up. Oh no, by faith, and God will make a way. Yes, he will, and yes, by faith. But sometimes we just want to shut people's feelings down or shut our feelings down and don't even allow ourselves to deal with them and turn them over to God. And that's why some of us are carrying some things still that we shouldn't be. But let's get back to Ruth. I'm so sorry. You know what? I promise. I'm gonna talk about me and Ruth. We just gonna keep it straight. I'm gonna try. I don't like to break promises. I'm gonna try. But so Naomi isn't being dramatic. She's like, look, just call me Mara. Call me bitter. And Ruth, what does she do? She doesn't argue. She doesn't preach. She doesn't force encouragement. She just starts working quietly, faithfully, humbly. She goes into the fields picking up leftovers, gathering what others leave behind. And listen, there's nothing glamorous about this. She's not chasing destiny. She's chasing dinner. Okay? Now remember, she don't know nothing about Boaz and all this, knight in shining armor stuff. She don't know. She just knows that she don't have a husband. Her mother-in-law don't have a husband. The sister-in-law left. She don't have a brother-in-law. She knows that the mother-in-law is saying, just call me bitter. They're going back. Obviously, they got to start over because she's out in the field picking up leftovers. She's scourging. Again, this isn't something, we romanticize this. And sometimes we miss the meat of what Ruth is trying to show us. So she's chasing dinner. And now here's some tea. I alluded to this earlier. Ruth wasn't looking for Boaz. Most people tell this story like she was. She wasn't. Again, she was looking for food. She was looking for provision. She was looking for survival. And that's important because sometimes God is working in places we're just trying to make it through. She's just trying to make it through that moment. And God is working behind the scenes. She wasn't saying, maybe I'll meet my future husband today. She was saying, hopefully we'll eat tonight. And somehow God was already moving. That's the real tea. She was out there scrounging for food, picking up leftovers. I can imagine, I talk about me. I used to envision her in this, gold, pretty, intricately detailed gown with a beautiful matching head cover. And she's out there all made up and she's like lounging out in the field. Don't ask me why you be lounging, but she's just lounging there, like on her side and casually picking up one piece of grain, two pieces of grain, and dipping them into this beautiful basket, and she's smiling and she's so happy and the sun is shining. That's how I used to envision it. But in reality, now I don't know what she was wearing, but they just journeyed, okay? They just went on a journey. They're back in town now. She's out there desperately searching for food and hoping they'll eat. So I doubt my vision was the right vision that I was imagining when hearing or reading about Ruth, right? So we know the next part. Like, she ends up in Boaz's field, and scripture says she happened to arrive there. And whenever the Bible says something like that, I smile because we know better. She didn't just happen to arrive there. We know better. We know God was all in this. So she arrives there and Boaz notices her. And not because she's flashy, not because she's demanding attention, but because her reputation had arrived before she did. I'm going to take a little pause there because reputation can go a long way. And it can even get there before you do. And that can be good or bad. Because you could have a bad reputation, but you can change. And by the time you get there, maybe people don't know you changed. So that can be good or bad. If you have a good reputation, hopefully you stay good. So by the time you get there, the reputation is correct. It lines up. But people had already seen her loyalty. People had seen her faithfulness. People had seen her commitment to Naomi. So she didn't have to go around telling people that she was committed, that she was loyal. She didn't have to do that. It was obvious. Because most people, like her sister-in-law, would go back home and start again. We just make it seem like, me just made it seem like, they was all living in one big happy house and the men went on to glory and the women just decided, or one of them just decided, we're just going to stay here in this house and live happily ever after. No, that didn't happen either. That didn't happen. Ruth chose to stay with Naomi. Naomi had nothing to offer. That's why she tells her to go back home. Just go. It's like she had nothing for her. She couldn't provide for her. But yet Ruth remained loyal. And so Boaz had heard about, Ruth and her loyalty and her faithfulness. And I'm sure he could see her work ethic working in the field. And he responds with kindness. He responds with protection. He responds with provision, with favor. And Ruth's response is beautiful and very human. She basically says, why me? Why have I found favor? Now this shows us another thing about Ruth. She recognizes grace when she sees it. She recognized it. And so, we know as it goes on that Naomi gets involved and she starts connecting the dots, and she realized something bigger may be happening, and she gives Ruth instructions. But here's what I love. She doesn't try to manipulate. Some people might think it's manipulation or it's pressure. She's not manipulating. She's not pressuring. She's not scheming. And she's not trying to force an outcome. She simply shows up and follows the instructions. Ruth shows up and follows the instructions. Sorry, I got distracted for a minute. Sometimes, doing this, distractions happen, but she simply shows up. And Boaz responds with integrity. This is important too. Not shortcuts, not exploitation, not trying to take advantage of her. He does things the right way. And in a world that loves shortcuts, that is refreshing, right? He could have taken advantage of her, but he didn't. And so those that are still waiting to be found, I'm not going to say looking for a husband, we're waiting to be found. Those that are out there waiting, that's refreshing. You have somebody that's not going to try to take advantage, not try to take shortcuts. Keep your eye on that one. Now, here's another part that people miss. The story isn't just about Ruth. It's about Naomi too. Because the story started with Naomi full. She was full of life, full of family, then empty, then bitter, then grieving, and slowly God starts rebuilding not just Ruth's future, but Naomi's hope. And I think that's beautiful too, because while Ruth is discovering what God is doing next, Naomi is healing from what happened before. Two things can be true and happen at once. So eventually Boaz redeems Ruth. Now let me stop here for a moment. Culturally in that time, just real quick, for those that may not know, if you had a relative, they called it a kinsman. If you had a relative, you were widowed, and one of your husband's, relatives, it could even be, a brother. It just had to be a kinsman, could marry you and redeem you in the sense that now they've taken on the responsibility for you and for providing and for, children or whatever have you. That was culturally accepted, allowed, and welcomed back in that day. Now I know where we at today. That we can't do that. That'll just be a little weird. I can't even imagine. But that was culturally accepted back then, right? So for him, and it was a big deal too, because now, like, again, they're just out there on their own, no protection, no provision, no anything. And now with Boaz coming in the picture and going to redeem them, they again have a chance. They have a future. They have hope. They have life. They have protection. So eventually Boaz, redeems Ruth. He marries her and they have a son. And get this part. And that son becomes a part of the lineage of Jesus. Think about that. A Moabite widow, an outsider, a woman with no visual future, visible future, excuse me. Visual too, she couldn't see it. But a woman who simply kept taking the next faithful step. And God weaves her into redemption history. Again, not because she knew the ending, but she trusted him in the middle. She didn't know what we knew, most of us, before we even read the story. She didn't know it. She lived that life like we do ours. One day, 1 minute, 1 nanosecond at a time. So let me tell you what this really is. Friend to friend, sister to sister, cousin to cousin. however you want to put it. Ruth's story isn't about Boaz. I know that's what everybody focuses on, but Boaz shows up in chapter 2. Ruth's faith shows up in chapter 1. The miracle isn't really that she met Boaz. The miracle is she kept walking when she had no reason to believe things would get better. Because most people don't take a step when they can't see the outcome. They don't. Ruth took a step when she couldn't. She did what most people won't do. And that's a different kind of faith. That's different. So, all right, here's our Monday move. Ask yourself, what decision am I avoiding because I can't see how it ends? What conversation maybe I'm avoiding? What opportunity? What act of obedience? What next step am I avoiding because I can't see how it ends? And you know what? Just maybe your next step doesn't require certainty. Maybe it requires trust. Maybe it requires trust. So if you're in a place where you've lost something, you're starting over, you don't know how the story ends, you can't see what's coming next. I was there not too long ago. But let me say this clearly. You don't have to know the ending to take the next step. And just because God hasn't revealed the whole plan doesn't mean he isn't already working. That's powerful. Who would have thought an outsider, a Moabite woman, a widow, would have so much faith, first of all, would be willing to stick by her mother-in-law and care for her, and would end up having a son that's connected to the lineage of the Savior. How about that? How about that? So maybe also you might be feeling like that outsider. You never know. God has a plan, and his plan even includes outsiders. It even includes widows. It even includes people who have suffered loss. How about that? All right, I'm going to leave that right there because as we see now, Ruth's story isn't really about finding Boaz. It's about choosing faith before you know what happens next. And if you're standing at a crossroads waiting for certainty, maybe certainty isn't coming. Maybe trust is. I'll meet you right back here next time between the verses. Real talk, real faith with Kelli LaVerne from Sunday to Monday and the rest of the week too. Oh, wait, before I go, if you haven't already, join our online podcast community. We are on Facebook. You can search for Between the Verses Podcast Community, and it should come right up. So look for us. We'd love to connect with you. I know I would, and other people that are listening in on the podcast Between the Verses and learning about these women. So join us. Come on over to the group, share your thoughts, meet some people, and continue the discussion there. Until next time.
Before you go, don't forget, subscribe, like, and share. And join the conversation. Search Facebook for Between the Verses Podcast Community. Until next time, keep growing, keep believing, and keep walking by faith between the verses with Kelli LaVerne.